Sorry about that, everybody. Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Tuesday, March 18th. We have a lot to cover on the show today. Before I get into all that, I just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. Makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net. That is gsmcpodcast.net. So let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. So we're going to start off the show. We're going to continue our Aaron Rodgers watch. So we are going to talk about the latest reports that we've been hearing on where he could possibly go, where is he going to sign, where would he like to sign, or could he end up retiring? We'll get into that whole conversation in just a second. We'll also talk some NBA. We will talk about the Dallas Mavericks. The fans continue to just show their frustrations over the team's decisions over the last couple of months with the Luka trade. And we'll also talk about the 76ers shutting down Paul George for the rest of the season as well. And, we'll talk about some of the matchups tonight as well, some of the NBA action. And also we got the first games of the March Madness tournament starting tonight as well. So we'll take a look at those matchups too. Then in the third part of the show, we'll talk about Kirk Cousins. So the Falcons, they ended up keeping him past Saturday, and that now made his signing bonus guaranteed. So we'll talk about what the Falcons plan on doing with Kirk Cousins. They want to keep him on the roster, but we'll get into the conversation of whether he's going to remain with the team or at some point they are going to let him go or trade him to another team, if that's even possible. So we'll get into that. I know I did say we'll recap the Tokyo series the following day, but we'll talk about the game in the fourth part of the show. I mean, we have to. It's the start of the baseball season. We'll get into it, what happened. Nothing really major. Dodgers did pick up the win, but we'll talk about I'll give you my thoughts on the game and what transpired during that. And then we will continue our season overviews of every team in the NFL. Today we will be covering the New England Patriots. So let's get into the first topic, which is talking about Aaron Rodgers and what's going on with the latest on that front. So, from everything that we've been seeing as of late, it's being reported that he wants to go to the Vikings, allegedly. Wants to sign with the Vikings. And, from what I've been seeing also, and you guys have been seeing the same thing as well, that the Vikings are kind of, in the middle with it. Whether or not to bring him in or not. Because you do have J.J. McCarthy, who the Vikings, they traded up to get him. And they look at him as their future. However, he is coming off of a meniscus injury. And he might not necessarily be ready for the start of the season next year. It's possible that, maybe the Vikings bring in someone other than Aaron Rodgers to just start the season and then the first quarter of the season, and then you give the ball to J.J. McCarthy. But if you bring in Aaron Rodgers, your intention is, hey, we're going to bring this guy in and he's going to start for us, and hopefully we could go to the promised land with him. That's why you make this move. Now, a lot of people are going to shake their head and say, no, that's not going to happen. Now, for me, I think if the Vikings were to bring in Aaron Rodgers, I think that would be a great spot for him. They made improvements on the offensive line because that was the weakness on the offense last year. There's familiarity there with Aaron Jones, and they just traded for Jordan Mason. So I think that's going to be a nice duo that they have there over in Minnesota. And then, of course, the embarrassment of riches with pass catchers. This would be one of the best supporting casts Aaron Rodgers has ever had if he were to go to Minnesota. And they're backed by a good defense. And they made improvements on that side of the ball as well, signing a couple of defensive linemen. And they're not done yet. There's always the draft, too. So, and we've talked about this, when you look at the teams that have interest or supposedly have interest, the Vikings are at the top. The Vikings are the closest team to getting to a championship and winning a championship. And that's what Aaron Rodgers wants to do. But you go to the Steelers. All right, the Steelers are a playoff team. But do we think that with Aaron Rodgers, are they going to take that next step? Now, I think, to be honest, if Aaron Rodgers was the quarterback last year for the Steelers, I don't think the Steelers lose 5 straight games. But then again, you could say, well, look what happened when he was with the Jets last year. But it's 2 different teams. So the Steelers would be number 2, and then you got the Giants, who have a young team. They have one of the youngest teams in the NFL, but they're not ready to compete yet, especially in their division. I mean, wherever he decides to go, if he continues to play, the NFC North is a tough division. The AFC North is going to be tough, and the NFC East is tough. So there's really no soft landing wherever he decides to go in terms of the teams in the division. But you're also hearing reports that if the Vikings don't bring him in, instead of picking either the Steelers or the Giants, he might just opt to retire. Or he could wait it out if an injury happens to a team that he could latch on to and take over as a starter. That's also an option. Now, for me, I hope it's not, because I want to just see him play. I want to continue to see him play every Sunday. The NFL is better with Aaron Rodgers in it. In a lot of people's eyes, they'll disagree with that. And that's fine, because there are a lot of people out there that are not fans of Aaron Rodgers. And I made the joke yesterday in our production meeting that since I've taken over this show and Matt has taken over the football show, the football podcast has gone from being a somewhat pro Aaron Rodgers show to a complete anti Aaron Rodgers show, because he's a Steelers fan and he does not want to see the Steelers bring in Aaron Rodgers. And he makes a lot of valid points, and I understand it from his perspective. I would like to see him go there just because, my dad's a Steelers fan, so there's rooting interest there. And obviously the Giants as well would be, that'd be a perfect situation, because that's my favorite football team, although I've been very disappointed with them over the last several years. And to see one of my favorite players play for that team, listen, at this point, I don't really care. I would take Aaron Rodgers for 1 year. They draft a young quarterback. He sits behind Rodgers. I'd be okay with that. But it's a very interesting situation, and you just have many people that are impatient, mainly the media. Adam Schefter, saying, why doesn't he just make a decision? We're playing the waiting game. It's not up to us. He's going to take the time to make his decision, and we'll find out soon enough. But there's people saying it could take months, and so be it. Look, I'm impatient too. But if that's what he's doing, there's nothing we can do about it. But it could just be because he's waiting on what the Vikings want to do. And I know people talk about Rodgers and affecting the culture. Like, if the Vikings bring in Aaron Rodgers, is he going to ruin the culture? Well, if he's there for 1 year, I don't think you have to worry about it. I think if Rodgers is brought into Minnesota, he's going to know what his role is. He's going to go out there and play football. Yeah, he'll probably, yeah, not probably, he will go on the McAfee show, but you just got to tune that out. You know, when he was going on the McAfee show, when he first started doing that, he won back to back MVPs. You know, and then he goes to the Jets, and I was hoping, he would turn that team around, but obviously he did not. And he is part of the blame, but there's a lot more blame to go around than just him. So, and then of course 2024 happens, and yeah, it was not a good year. Not a good year for the team. So, yeah, if he goes on the McAfee show while he's the Vikings quarterback, yeah, some people will be annoyed by it, but I remember, as a Giant fan, Eli Manning would make weekly appearances on sports talk radio. Quarterbacks do that. Now, obviously, it's a little bit different because the McAfee show is a different kind of sports show. It's not a traditional sports radio show. And obviously, they don't just talk about sports; they talk about other things. So that's kind of like the extra stuff. But we'll see what happens. I hope he doesn't retire. I hope he does continue to play somewhere because I do think he could still play. But I know there's a lot of people that can't wait for him to retire. And if he does, to me, it's going to be sad because, again, it's another great quarterback, from the 2010s that's going to call it a career. But hopefully he continues to play and he gets another shot. So we're going to take our first break now. And then when we come back, we'll talk some basketball. We'll talk about the Mavericks. We'll talk about the 76ers. We'll get into some of the other NBA action as well. And also, we'll take a look at the matchups for tonight to start off the March Madness tournament. So, with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.